What happens if you overload a constructor in the base class and child class? You can't overload constructors. Or wait a sec, you can't override constructors. You can overload constructors, yes. If you overload a constructor in both the base class and the child class, so if I were to introduce another overload here, and then another overload here, I can choose which one of the base constructors I want to invoke. I can invoke the one that takes in first name and last name, or I can invoke the one that takes in name. So I can choose that. Now, if I introduce a third class, now this is very important. If I introduce a third class, here's the important thing. Because constructors aren't inherited, my child class needs to have a constructor that invokes not the person constructors, but I need to create a constructor in the child type that invokes the employee constructors. So I'll only have these two constructors to choose from. So you'll notice if I go ahead and say public child and then add in the colon base, you'll notice that the only constructors I get to choose from are the employee ones. It doesn't care about the person ones. Because if I pass in first name, last name, and yearly income, what's going to happen right here is it's going to thread these values into the employee constructor, and then the employee constructor is going to thread these values into the person constructor. The program crashed if you didn't force these constructors. The program would have the potential to become an invalid state. And part of programming and part of good object-oriented design is all about reducing the possibility of your program going into an invalid state, enforcing valid state throughout the execution of your program. So no, it wouldn't crash necessarily, but it would give you more opportunities to create code that does crash your program down the line. Yeah, well, first I just want to talk about base a little bit more because we are going to be talking about abstract classes here pretty soon. But I want to talk about base. You can use base in one other context. And somebody was asking, could I write a calculate yearly income implementation on my employee class that is written in terms of the execution of the calculate yearly income method on the person class? The answer is yes. We can use the base keyword, and we can say base dot calculate yearly income year, and then we can modify that value even more. We can say, okay, employees get 100 times the yearly income that normal people do. By adding the base modifier, we are specifying that we want to invoke the parent method. With two classes, you call it base and child. What's the terminology once you add a third? Honestly, the situations in which I have an inheritance hierarchy of 2 or more types is rare. But base and child are relative terms. For example, the base of child is employee. If I were to talk about child in terms of if it's the child, I would say yes, because it is the child. I mean, not literally, but I mean, it is literally, but
well, it's the grandchild of person.
ASDF is the child of employee, and it's also a child of person. And depending on the context, I might refer to different things as base or child. But generally, when I say the base class, I'm referring to the class immediately above it.